Our passage today is actually from Luke chapter 12 in verses 32 through 40. So if you want to go ahead and hold on to that, I'm going to get to it in just a minute. And I venture to say that most of us stay relatively well informed about local, national, and even world news in our congregation. We get daily doses of stories about tragedies from all over the globe. We've got shootings and deadly and catastrophic weather events and horrific accidents and conspiracies. We get more than our fair share right here in the good old USA. We're still reeling from two very recent and very deadly incidents in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. We may not all use the same sources for our news, but we all get the gist. This world is both a wonderful and a scary place to live. I'm sure that all of us have contemplated at one time or another where the safest place on earth might be so that we might go there. That search or a longing for a safe place usually happens after the place that you thought was safe was violated in some unexpected way. That you never had that happen to you, then count yourself fortunate. But you can't live in this day and age of information without seeing it happen to countless others, the violation of one's safety and security. Just after the most recent massacre in El Paso, a young woman who was being interviewed used those exact terms to describe the aftermath for her. It was a serious violation of her sense of safety and security. There's a term that the younger generation uses, staying woke. It's easy enough to translate. If you're not asleep, you're woke. Staying woke refers to an awareness of social injustices around us, in particular, the social injustices related to racial biases and discrimination that are systematically ingrained in our society. And for those of us who have not endured those injustices, it can be difficult to be aware of them. Until and unless we truly love someone who is affected and we feel their suffering, we can remain blind and unaware. So the implication is, if you're not woke, then you're asleep. Being asleep in that sense means that you're not aware, thus you are not engaged in the topic on any level. You might even insist it doesn't exist because it doesn't exist for you. Now, let's apply that potential resistance to being engaged in today's scripture passage about the kingdom of God. The concepts are being aware, being engaged, and living as if it is or is not true, or that it does or does not exist, depending on your relationship to it. In today's passage in Luke chapter 12, Jesus addresses this from a different angle. Jesus encourages his disciples to stay aware at all times of their inheritance, which is the kingdom of God. It's a difficult concept to grasp, and Jesus is aware of our human shortcomings, so he takes us through a path of understanding that is, to say the least, indirect. He's aware that we view most unknown things through a lens of fear. And Jesus knows that our values that develop in human communities are inevitably not the values that he's teaching us about the kingdom of God. Jesus' goal is to make sure that his disciples are woke. He needs engaged and alert followers in order for him to usher in this kingdom of God and to share it with those who will inherit it. But until we know and believe deep down that God is good and that God loves us and protects us as full children and heirs, we will remain asleep and unaware and disengaged in the work that we're being called to do. From Luke's perspective, putting today's passage in context, Jesus' teachings on the kingdom of God are focused on painting a picture of God the Father as one who loves and cares for does God provide for our needs. As we reach verse 32 of today's passage, we have culminated the point. God is a good, loving, and generous Father to his children, to his heirs. Now join me as we read today's text, Luke 12, 32 through 40. Before we read, let's pray for the Holy Spirit to guide us into God's wisdom through these words of Jesus. Father God, through your Spirit now, we humbly ask you to open our hearts and our eyes and our ears to your teaching. Help us to acknowledge your goodness and to know your love in the deepest corners of our hearts. And as you touch us, Lord, also awaken us to your presence and work in the world. Remove from us any other notion of identity that does not emanate from you. Let us think and move and work only as your children, both heirs and representatives of your kingdom here on earth. Speak now through your word, Lord, and through your servant, a weak but willing vessel. Empower us through your Holy Spirit, and in the name of Jesus. Amen. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return from the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. If he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Again, the word of God for the people of God. We say thanks be to God. There are so many rich teachings in this short passage, so much ground that we could cover, but rather than digging deeply into each and every verse, I want us to focus on just two. The first one being verse 32. Hear these words of Jesus again. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. There's a lot to unpack even in that little sentence, but let's start unpacking. First, let's look at do not be afraid, little flock. The imperative or the command, do not be afraid, is something we're very familiar with in Scripture. Oftentimes, before God does something spectacular, especially if it's involving one of us, he tells the person or the people involved something along these lines. Think about Abraham or Moses or Joshua. In Joshua 1:9 it says, be strong and courageous. Do not fear, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. See, we need convincing not to be afraid, particularly when we're involved in the work that God is doing. We need repeated convincing not to be afraid. It's a human trait, obviously dating back to the earliest humans, but who wouldn't be fearful in this place and time where we live? Our news lately has been absolutely terrifying. We're afraid to go to Walmart. The purpose of mass shootings that we keep seeing is to terrorize people. It works. That's why humans have been doing it to other humans for so long. But you see, fear is the root of hate. Fear leads us not to open ourselves up generously and love others. Fear leads us down an entirely different path. Fear is the breeding ground for hate and all of its conspiracies. We need to be convinced not to be afraid. pretty big fears that we learn very early on. Regardless of who our teachers are, there are always opportunities for these lessons to creep in. We fear losing what we've gained or earned or collected. We fear the stranger among us who might want what we have or who we might suppose would take something violently. Even more, we fear death itself. Because even though we know the story of Jesus' victory over death, we continue to see it happen around us over and over and over and over again. We have a form of faith that is clouded by our default mode, which is fear. We have to be convinced, not to be afraid. So Jesus says, do not be afraid, little flock. And he calls us little flock. Isn't that so endearing? We have nicknames for the people that we love, our spouses and our children. I call Joshua Booley, and I call London Lovey, and we call Jaden Bug. Ironically, he hates bugs, but we still consider that a term of endearment for him. What does little flock imply to you? The first image that I see is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You know, Jesus uses signals from the Psalms many times to invoke images while he's teaching, and I believe that this is just another one of those times. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Once we know who we are, once we know our identity as children of God, children who are well cared about and well cared for, we can begin to shed some of the fear that we carry so easily. We can stop being so much like skittish little sheep. We can relax enough to think about the things that we treasure and the legacy that we want to leave. We don't fear death anymore, and we begin to think of ways to live a richer life. When you're anxious and nervous about your life and your possessions, you try to preserve it all. You make safe choices and you isolate yourself. You hoard things that you don't even need because having lots of things make you feel prepared for something. You may not even know what you're preparing for, but you'll have these skis and this snowsuit just in case Snowmageddon hits Wake County this year. You'll have 40 pairs of shoes because you need a variety in order to match all of your outfits. And I know that I'm preaching to myself right now. I know I have too many shoes. We find value in things that make us look and feel better about who we are. That's our cue that we're not remembering who we are nor whose we are. We are worth so much more than that. Our inheritance is so much bigger than that. Amen. You see, this treasure, inheriting the kingdom, this treasure can be baffling. First of all, we should understand that this is a gift, this inheritance. It's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, Jesus says. What he isn't saying is that it's your employer's good pleasure for you to earn the kingdom. He isn't even saying it's your king's good pleasure to grant you the kingdom. Jesus is saying it is your Father's good pleasure, implying the inheritance factor, to give you the kingdom. You cannot earn this in any way. It is a gift. It's an amazingly good and generous inheritance. It can be translated as royal power or sovereignty. We become joint heirs with Jesus Christ, according to Romans 8:17. Do you see how much bigger this is than anything else we might value here on earth? We have to be convinced, not to be afraid, and we have to be reminded who we are and whose we are, so that we never get confused by any other identity or label that we might latch onto here on earth. So you see, when you know that you're loved and cared for by God. And you can push that fear aside, that fear that makes you hold on tighter to your stuff, or the fear that makes you avoid looking in the eyes of a stranger. You begin to breathe differently. You begin to think and behave differently. You begin to find a willingness to use your resources differently, because your real treasure lies in an eternal, impenetrable storehouse. So you can be generous and loving, because you don't have to protect your assets. God is your very good shepherd. You listen to the Spirit of God tell you to speak to someone who doesn't look or talk at all like you. And you strike up a conversation. And maybe you make a friend. And you learn not only to lay aside your fear of people who are different, you learn to love these people that you might have once feared. Or you might feel a nudge one day to offer something that you have to someone else that you've learned needs it more than you do. And you respond to the nudge by giving away your stuff. And you know what? It feels great. You feel alive. And this commitment to living according to the rules of the kingdom of God brings you joy. In verse 34, Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And I don't know about you, but I do pay attention to how I spend my money. A lot of my money goes to the grocery store or for eating away from home. Now, I don't even eat that much food, honestly. But I don't shy away from food that costs too much if I really want it. I just paid last weekend $15 for 2 jars of pickled items at the farmer's market. And as we were standing in line, I even told Jay, I'm being indulgent right now because I felt a little guilty. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I admit it. I love pickled beets and pickled okra. But spending my resources that way doesn't fill me with joy. It fills me with pickle juice and some anxiety, but not joy. I want to challenge all of us to pay attention to where we focus our resources. Material, mental, emotional, physical, financial. What do we treasure? Do we treasure earthly things that lead us into this fear of loss? Or do we treasure things that have eternal value? Treasuring things of eternal value fills us with love and compassion for our neighbors. Treasuring things of temporal value leads us into anxiety and fear of our neighbors. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. As we are reminded of who we are and whose we are, and are encouraged to set aside all fear, we're taught how to recognize our true treasure. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Once we recognize that our treasure is the kingdom of God, we're taught to keep our hearts and our minds focused on that treasure, and then how to share it generously with those who need it. My God, has anybody heard that today? The return of Jesus fully consummates our inheritance in the kingdom of God. That royal power that we have inherited as sons and daughters of God. It is neither our compensation for work done on earth, nor is it an achievement of our goodness or success. It is instead God's generous gift to His children. We cannot receive it except through God, and we cannot protect it by any power that we possess. Grace alone sustains it. We receive God's gift through faith, childlike faith, and we are instructed simply to treasure it above all else. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Our loving and generous Father, Thank you for your loving kindness toward us, for the plans you have for us, and the preparation that Jesus has made for us eternally, going ahead of us in the way that we too will go. We see it this afternoon. We recognize that we've been given a treasure, and out of that treasure we're taught to be rich toward you and toward our neighbors. Continue to strip us of fear that misleads us and takes us down the wrong paths. Fill us with your love and your power and your peace and patience, your joy and generosity, Lord. Let your Spirit mold us and make us into the people that you created us to be. We thank you now in the powerful name of Jesus the Christ. Amen. Amen. We come into this